Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. Today we're going to talk about some Warner Archive. I have three different Warner Archive Blu-rays of varying film types. So let's start back in 1940 with They Drive by Night. This is directed by Raoul Walsh, who is a director that I absolutely am a fan of and who has been getting some love on Blu-ray in the last several years. He's gotten releases of films such as High Sierra, that got a Criterion release with Bogart. This also features Bogart and George Raft and Ann Sheridan and Ida Lupino and Alan Hale. Also from Warner Archive, a movie called Strawberry Blonde with James Cagney got a release. And most recently, The Roaring Twenties, which I have talked about on this channel, got a release from Criterion as well as a 4K. So Raoul Walsh, very solid workman, director, studio director, did a lot of stuff, that you could say would be falling into the genre category. This is no exception to that in some ways. I'm curious how they sell it on the back here. George Raft and Humphrey Bogart share a driving ambition in They Drive by Night, a feisty tale of brothers trying to make it as independent truck drivers. Ann Sheridan plays a truck stop waitress, dishing both the daily special and the patter, and Ida Lupino is a headstrong executive, mixing business and romance with murder. And this is interesting because I'll talk about how I see what these characters and the actors are playing. With Bogart riding shotgun en route to leading man stardom, which he would achieve the following year, he goes into Maltese Falcon territory and beyond. But yeah, he's not the headliner here. George Raft is the man at the time, and George Raft would actually turn down Casablanca, a whole other thing. The sterling example of Warner Brothers' social conscious filmmaking proved a sturdy vehicle for both. It proved even more fortuitous for Miss Lupino. Her courtroom breakdown scene made her an overnight sensation that landed her a contract with the studio. Well, that is fascinating. I did not know that. Ida Lupino, of course, not only a great actor, but one of the great female directors of the period. She's got a whole box set from Kino. You can check out her films there. She's really interesting as a filmmaker, but very big in this performance in the best way. But yeah, so the idea is that Bogart and Raft play brothers. They're Joe and Paul Fabrini. They have their own truck. They're independent. They're always trying to stay one step ahead of the finance company who is on their case to have them pay off the truck, and they are struggling to do so. And it's sort of those one step forward, two step back kind of movies. They want to continue to work for themselves. A situation arises where they end up having to work for a trucking company, which is run by an ex-trucker played by Alan Hale. That is Sr., not Alan Hale Jr. Alan Hale Sr., who often was in films with Errol Flynn, and who is great in this movie, and unfortunately an annoyance to his wife, played by Ida Lupino. So they say she's an executive. I suppose so. But she is the wife of the guy who runs the trucking company. And because of circumstances, Joe and Paul end up having to work for this trucking company, which is not a terrible thing because the Alan Hale character is a nice guy, and he's gotten a nice business going. And one of the guys that works for him is a great character actor named Roscoe Carnes, who I like a lot, who's in things like It Happened One Night, His Girl Friday, 20th Century, Gambling Ship, which I just talked about on a recent Pure Cinema episode, he's always kind of a smart aleck, makes crazy faces. In this case, he plays Irish McGurn, a truck driver who works for Alan Hale's company and who has an addiction to pinball games and makes funny faces while he plays pinball. But he has some good moments in this movie, a good supporting actor character. But so this movie is interesting because in some ways it feels like between this and a movie called Thieves Highway with Richard Conte, you may have sort of the basis for the movie White Line Fever, which would come out in the 70s and stars Jan Michael Vincent and Kay Lenz, a great trucker movie. But this movie gets interesting because it sidetracks, and I forgot about what happens, but basically the idea is that the Ida Lupino character is very much into the George Raft character, the Joe Fabrini character. He has eyes for Ann Sheridan, who plays a waitress that he and his brother meet at a diner that they regularly go to. She quits that job. Joe gives her a ride to L.A., sets her up with a place. They start to fall for each other. But all the while, Ida Lupino has had a thing for Joe. He's not interested because he's friends with Alan Hale and doesn't want to mess him over. He knows that this is his wife and they're married. But she takes it to an extreme at a certain point. And it gets kind of like almost Fatal Attraction-y in a way, like a proto-Fatal Attraction-y thing. And there is like a courtroom scene where she kind of flips out in this way. But yeah, it's a really interesting performance from her. And Ann Sheridan's great too in a supporting role. Bogart's good, but the idea is that, these guys, some of them want to get off the road and stop with this lifestyle that is not as reliable as some other job, or it's not as great for your home life, if you will, because you're on the road so much, you're tired so much, you're trying a lot of the driving in this movie, and the dangers that they run into are driving too long and falling asleep and having a wreck. And there are some wrecks in this movie, there are some injuries and some deaths as a result. I won't go into who or what happens, but yeah, interesting movie. And need to see a nice Blu-ray of it from Warner Archive. So this has the Lux Radio Theater broadcast from 1941 with George Raft and Lana Turner. Divided Highway, the story of They Drive by Night, as well as the classic W.B. short Swing Time in the Movies. So a few things extra included on this one. And it's great for your Raoul Walsh collection if you've been building one up like I have. Okay, so next up we have from 1980, I want to say 89, but I'm guessing that's probably wrong. Yes, 88, my bad. Stand and Deliver. And this movie, a big one for Edward James Olmos, and it's one of those movies that was nominated, as was Lou Diamond Phillips, for Best Actor in this movie, and both are great in the film. Actually got a lot of awards. They were nominated for Golden Globes, Independent Spirit Awards, and such. And this film, I guess, accurately portrays was sort of based on... Okay, hold on a second. Stand and Deliver does just that. This moving, acclaimed crowd pleaser is the dynamic saga of real-life heroes determined to conquer a foe few people dare to confront, the National Advanced Placement Calculus Exam. Edward James Olmos, a 1988 Best Actor Academy Award nominee, gives a performance of fire and grit as Jaime Escalante, a math teacher at East Los Angeles Garfield High who refuses to write off his inner-city students as losers. Escalante cajoles, pushes, threatens, and inspires 18 students who are struggling with fractions to become math whizzes. Lou Diamond Phillips and Andy Garcia co-star in this Rocky of the classroom. No doubt about it, you'll stand and cheer. So, yeah, it's a really inspirational movie. It is directed by Ramon Menendez, written by Menendez and Tom Muska, based on the true story of a high school mathematics teacher, Jaime Escalante. And, of course, that, again, is Edward James Olmos. The film was selected in the United States National Film Registry in 2011 as being culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. But yeah, it's a really, moving story. I find this kind of story of a teacher who doesn't allow the student, the school at large and the folks at large's ideas of students to, be his limitations. And he sees these kids as just needing to be inspired and do that. He's a former computer guy. He leaves a computer job, was going to teach computers, and then gets assigned to a math class and seems to really take to that. And he is able to make these kids love math, or at least engage with it in a way, by changing things like, problems about pimps on the blackboard, like how many girlfriends does so-and-so have, and trying to make it relatable, because math is a difficult thing, I think, for kids to relate to. And he's got some gangster kids in the class that he's dealing with. And it's a really powerful, emotional story, and incredibly acted, again, by the whole cast, but certainly by Olmos and Lou Diamond Phillips. And just one of those movies that's long overdue for a Blu-ray. I wish it had a little bit more in the way of special features. It just has the trailer, and that's it, unfortunately. But the transfer looks better than it's looked in recent years. It's a nice-looking scan of the film. For a while, I feel like this one, I could be wrong. Maybe it does have an HD version available now on digital, but I thought it was an SD-only movie. So it's really nice to see this widescreen movie looking good and inspiring as it did back in 1988. But yeah, Eddie Olmos, just a fantastic actor. I most recently saw him in John Sayles' film Go for Sisters, where he plays a blind ex-cop, I think, helping a couple ladies find one of them's kidnapped son. And it is a great movie. It is an Eddie Olmos movie from 2013, so many years after this one, but he is as good in that film as he is in anything. A consummate actor, a consummate performer that I've always respected and enjoyed. And you really get into this guy, this Jaime Escalante character. He's funny, he's engaging, he's intelligent, and he just really is the kind of teacher that you'd love to have, you'd love to be inspired by. So it's neat that it's based on a true story as well. Anyway, so that is Stand and Deliver, finally on Blu-ray. And lastly, a little lesser known film here called The Little Drummer Girl. And this one will be of interest for a few reasons. It's directed by George Roy Hill, for one. And George Roy Hill, a director of some note, a guy who, did a lot of interesting, memorable films, not the least of which are things like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, The Sting, Slapshot, World According to Garp. I like The Great Waldo Pepper, A Little Romance. Quentin Tarantino's a big fan of Funny Farm as his last film, one of the great last films. He did a movie called The World of Henry Orient, which Twilight Time put out on Blu-ray years ago. A fascinating director. And so this is one of his later films. It's from 1984. So that's one, And secondly, it has Diane Keaton, who I'm a big fan of, and Klaus Kinski, also a big fan of him. And it is based on John le Carré, who just got a documentary made about him by Errol Morris called The Pigeon Tunnel, which is an Apple doc, and definitely fascinating story of the author and where he came from. And yeah, really neat doc. Anyway, le Carré, his spy novels were the basis for a lot of stuff, including films like The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, The Deadly Affair, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, multiple versions, Smiley's People, Russia House, Tailor of Panama, The Constant Gardener, a most wanted man. I mean, it goes on and on. He's quite a renowned spy novelist. Palestinian intelligence says she's loyal to their cause. Israeli counterintelligence says she's bright, creative, underused, romantic, and a liar. Diane Keaton stars as Charlie, a repertory actress and Palestinian sympathizer who plays the role of and for her life when she's thrust onto the center stage of international espionage. Klaus Kinski and Yorgo Voyagis co-star as shrewd Israeli operatives who plot to use Charlie as bait to capture an elusive Palestinian terrorist, Sami Frey. Director George Rahil masterfully arranges the pieces of this cloak and dagger puzzle based on John le Carré's bestseller into a dazzling thriller racing through full tilt through London, Munich, Athens, Jerusalem, and Beirut. March to the enthralling beat of The Little Drummer Girl. So obviously a very timely film to put out with how things are with Israel and Palestine at the moment. And so it feels like perhaps a good time for this to be out for folks to watch it. It is, I think, an interesting performance from Diane Keaton, and it is a very, I think, obviously well written and plotted spy story. And so on that level, it's fascinating, and it is part of this great canon of work that John le Carré did. And so this one, I just don't feel like a lot of people have seen it and are talking about it, despite the cast and the director and the source novel. I guess John le Carré even shows up in a small part in this film. But this idea of taking an actress and forcibly recruiting her and how she deals with that and how she goes about what she's being recruited to do are all things that make this story interesting, I think. Again, another one I'd love to have some extras for, any kind of interviews or commentaries. Sadly, that is not the case. We have a theatrical trailer on here, and that's it. But that said, nice to have more John le Carré, adaptations on Blu-ray. So that is The Little Drummer Girl from 1984. That'll do it for this small trio of Warner Archive releases. I will have more in the coming weeks, hopefully. There's some exciting stuff coming from Warner Archive in the month of April, including a couple early Francis Ford Coppola films, You're a Big Boy Now and The Rain People. I'm a big fan of both of those films and very excited to have them on Blu-ray, especially The Rain People, which was one of the first, if I recall, one of the first Warner Archive DVDs to ever come out. So that one's been a long time coming on Blu-ray, and I cannot wait to rewatch it in said format. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.